Just want to say thanks so much to Helen Dewey, who put a whole lot of work to pull this together, both bringing audience participants and presenter participants. So it takes a lot of work to make something like this happen. And thank you so much, Helen. I just want to suggest these guidelines, and I don't think I'll be referring back to this during the presentations. But I just want to make the point that this is a peer-to-peer program. These are neighbors, right? We're all Medfielders sharing stories, talking about our own experiences. And so what this is not, it's not what I would call a top-down program. We're not here to preach or to sell or even to provide expertise. It's the experience that's important here. Well, everyone learns along the way, but no one here is pretending to be experts, professional experts. Experts are awesome, and they're absolutely necessary in these processes, like a contractor, a consultant. You have to buy a car from a car dealer, etc. But that's not this program, so we're going to encourage anybody and everybody to go elsewhere to look for such expertise if you want to, as you want to pursue these technologies. And we're starting off today with solar. And thank you very much, Brian and Heidi. Please take it away.
So hopefully everybody can see the screen we've got going. Brian and Heidi Erickson, we are at 10 Foundry Street here in Medfield. That's our house. It's a 1984, 3,500 square foot house. We have done quite a bit of upgrades since we moved in to try to make it a more efficient house. We went through Mass Save and a whole bunch of other initiatives to try to figure out best ways to sort of make the most with what we had, and decided in 2020 that the next logical step for us is to add solar. At the time, what you see in the picture is not what our front yard looked like. We used to have an entire front yard of pine trees. So our first system, we expected to not cover all of our electrical needs, but we wanted to minimize as much of our carbon footprint as we possibly could. So what we did is we added what we have, this system one. Provider is Sunrun, and they put in a roughly 9.8 kilowatt system. We decided that we were already doing some landscape work. We took all the trees out of our front yard, which gave us significantly better production from our existing system and justified adding a second one. So between the two, we're now at almost 14 kilowatt hours, which does a remarkable job in covering what's probably a pretty heavy electrical usage now, electrical heat pumps and everything else that go along with it. So our goal was to go as much internally generated solar as we possibly could. Our system is leased. That made the most sense for us, but we do have the option to purchase, and we've been thinking about doing that now that we've got both systems in place. If we were to have purchased at the outset, it would have been about a 10-year break even. And with both of our kids having moved out, we didn't know if 10-year break even made sense. Were we going to downsize or whatnot? We haven't decided to do that, so 10 years even now might make sense for us to do. So at the time, there were no massive tax incentives that were available, and that also changes some of the math. The two charts on the side show the typical production profile that we've got. You can see, obviously, in the winter months, the production isn't nearly as strong as it is in the spring and summer, but that's worked quite well for us. And then you can see that we added this new system. It just came online in September, so we have another month there. What we decided, the reason we decided to do this first and foremost is that it was a much more carbon efficient way of powering our home. Secondarily, it was less expensive. Our average kilowatt hour charge through both the Sunrun leased systems is roughly 23 cents per kilowatt hour. Anything that we generate in excess of our use goes to Sunrun, so we don't get to bank that. That's the difference between the lease and the purchase. And then anything that we use over and above what we generate, we use at Eversource rates. We did opt into the 100% solar on the Medfield Community Electric. So even though we may not have full generation on our own panels, we are 100% solar powered, which made us feel both really good and that too was a cost benefit over the existing Eversource rates. If we had the summer generation year round, it would be enough to run the entire house. So having that supplemental summer or supplemental solar, makes a ton of sense for us. A couple things to consider. Even though the systems and the vendors have gotten better, there will still be a lot of delays. The first set of delays we experienced were because of COVID. There was shortages on equipment, there were shortages on installation teams, etc. But once we got the panels on, there was another set of delays between the installation and the inspection. And then finally, there has been on both systems a delay in the inspection and turn on. And I would say that it's probably been averaging at about 2 months of delay between when we said let's go and when we actually start production. So keep that in mind. I think it's certainly worth the delays that we experienced, but there will be delays. Another thing we found out sort of the hard way is that it was pretty expensive for us. We had to put a new roof on after the fact, so it cost us money to have them come out, take the panels down, and then reinstall them. I think several programs now will help you evaluate your roof quality and whether you should replace it before you put it on, and some of them give you incentives and they will actually potentially pay for a new roof before they put them on. But that's differs by vendor, so think of that. And then the last thing is if you have the ability to choose where your meters are going to be placed on your house, that's a big consideration. I'm going to slide back to the very front picture of the house and see a little bit. Our panel meters are right here in the front. So our next plan for landscaping is to do something to sort of cover those up. Again, that's a minor issue, but if you can put everything on the back side of your house, that solves that for you as well. But all in all, we've been extremely happy with it. It's generated more electricity than it was rated for, and we would absolutely do it again. And that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian and Heidi. So a few folks have come in since the beginning, and we said at the beginning that we'll be holding questions until after the presentations, but do hold them. In other words, you might want to jot it down if you have a question or a point at this point. And also for those who came in late, this is a peer-to-peer program. We're not intending to be experts or even provide expertise for anyone's particular situation. This is just the experience from neighbor to neighbor of the big three measures that can decrease carbon footprint in a household. And the next of those three is heat pumps. Kirsten and Glenn and Kirsten, sorry, are speaking next about geothermal ground source heat pump. And later, Ken will be speaking about air source heat pump. Thank you, Glenn and Kirsten.
Thank you, Fred. All right, we'll begin with our journey of installing a geothermal ground source heat pump system. This was completed last year in August, the end of August of last year. Let's start by talking about sort of why we chose to go with a ground source geothermal heat pump system. Our house is, actually the HVAC system in our house was approaching 20 years old. We were starting to see some degradation and it wasn't cooling during the hot days. So we knew we had to replace the system. And so we performed an evaluation. We worked with a couple of different, actually we went out and got 3 different quotes, 2 of which were conventional HVAC systems, 1 of which was geothermal. And what we learned was that the geothermal system would be about $10,000 more expensive than the conventional HVAC system, conventional being natural gas. We did at our house, we already had installed a set of solar panels from what was Solar City and now is Tesla. They were bought by Tesla, and that was put in 2016. And we had basically oversized the system when it was installed. So we're developing credits. We didn't buy, but we have a 20-year lease where we get all the electricity off the system. And so we were developing credits, and we had built up a bank of about $2,000 of credit with Eversource. So we had that money available to use for our heat pump system. We also had plans to do landscaping in our front yard. And so we recognized that if we had to put a geothermal system in, there would be drilling and the lawn would get disrupted, but we were planning to do work there anyway, so that we didn't see that as a big negative, where if you weren't planning that, it could be a negative because you'd have to pay for landscaping after the drilling was occurred. And finally, we're concerned about climate change. We've always looked to be green, and this was an opportunity to be green, going with geothermal. So, Kirsten?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that to me, the landscaping issue was really important. So in addition to hearing from MEA that you just wait the natural point of replacement for things, the natural point of re-landscaping also factored in when you're going to do geothermal. And we'll explain that a little bit more later.
So again, we're not experts, but some basics about our geothermal system. It is ground source. That means you need wells. We have 2 of them that were dug. They spec'd it out, and they're 400 feet deep. They go through bedrock. The bedrock is actually where the heat is sunk or pulled from, so it's important that they get through bedrock. They put antifreeze in the system. It's closed loop, and it moves around, basically moving heat from the ground to your house or moving heat from your house into the ground. So that's the 2 ways it works in the different modes, whether you're heating or cooling. We are in a watershed protected district, and that was not an issue with the town. No problem with permits for that, because again, it's closed, so it doesn't impact what's in the ground. You do need to have ductwork in your house. So if you have, baseboard heat, that's not going to work. In order to put a geothermal system in, you need to have the vents already in your house. You could have them put in, but that would be an extra cost. One of the advantages is the condensers that were outside of our house that would kick on and made a whirling sound when the fans were running. Those completely go away. The heat exchanger is inside your house. Your heat pump is inside your house, and it's essentially silent. But what isn't silent is the way heat pumps work is they don't heat up as much as a natural gas system, so they have to blow more air. And so you need stronger fans. So it does make a little bit louder inside the house, and it's like a white noise background of the fan when it's running, definitely louder than when we had just the conventional HVAC.
I will add that because it doesn't heat the air quite as hot as gas does, it's better if you have really dry skin and don't like a dry heat. It's a little bit better in that respect because the temperature is not as hot, maybe 10 degrees or so cooler, I think, than gas would heat.
The vendor we ended up going with is Dandelion Energy, and we chose Dandelion. I actually had seen them, or Kirsten and I had seen them on This Old House many, many years ago, 5 years ago. Early in 2020, I called them then. They were not installing in the Massachusetts, but they put us on a list and said when they do, they would get in touch with us in April 2022. They did reach out. We started conversations then. We signed a contract in June 2022. Like Brian mentioned, it went slower than we expected. It took almost a year for the installation to start. And it came online in August 2023, the end of August 2023. So it was about a year and a couple months cycle to get it up and running. The staff we interacted with and the vendors were great. We were very happy with Dandelion Energy, but we found that internally they didn't communicate well, and we had some issues between how the system was originally spec'd and what we ended up with. And that caused some consternation, and we talked to them about that because it wasn't as efficient as we believed it should have been. And they did give us a credit of about $2,500 because of the mistakes they made between design and implementation.
I would add that if you were to do it now, then we really only knew of one vendor. Well, we heard actually from Fred of another one, but we didn't go back and get a second quote, and we would now, if we could do it over again today, we'd get 2 or 3 geothermal quotes as well as a couple of gas quotes. But
the financial, after 1 year, we've been live just over a year now, and so I was able to do a year and wanted to cover the numbers. The total cost of the system is what they totaled up was $82,200, but that was before all the discounts. There was a $5,000 that we paid for ductwork improvements, for sealing and such, that we would have done even if we did the conventional HVAC. So you have to take that out of the price. And then they did give us a $12,500 discount for being an early adopter for Dandelion in Massachusetts. We got $15,000 in federal and Massachusetts credits, including the Mass Save equipment credits and such. And then that $2,500 or $2,700 credit for the unforeseen changes. They reduced the price by that. We also got a federal tax reduction of about $2,000. That'll differ depending on your stances. So our net cost was about $45,000 versus the quotes we averaged for the natural gas systems were $35,000. So we see a delta of about $10,000. That using that delta, that with our solar panels, no electric costs, the ROI is 4.8 years. Without solar panels, it would be close to 14 years. So there's a big difference. And if you take into the fact that we had credits that we burned through $500 worth of credits, the ROI goes to 6.3 year. So depending on how you look at it, depends on how you see it. So in summary, the ground source heat pump has demonstrated with using the solar panels that it's a very, very efficient way to heat and cool our house. We're extremely happy with the system. We have used Eversource as a grid. This is important because we basically pump our electricity back that we overproduce, and then we use it for running the system. So that's important that exists, and net metering exists in Massachusetts, and that helps. Our solar panels are producing 100% of the energy for all of our heating, cooling, power. Basically, we run an electric car off that. So we've been able to run the whole house on that 11.1 megawatt system, so smaller than the one that Brian has.
Yeah, I guess our return on ROI, return on investment would be even better if we didn't have the electric car as well, or if we had a slightly bigger solar array than we do.
So overall, we're very, very happy with the installing the ground source geothermal system. And with solar panels, it really, really works well together. And we've reduced our carbon footprint to near zero. We know it's good for the planet. And I just want to make sure that you understand it also made financial sense for us too. So the whole system has been very positive. That's all we have. I'll turn it back over to you, Fred.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. And Jeff is next up with an electric vehicle story.
Thanks, Fred. Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Hyman. I live at Metacomet Street here in Medfield. So this is my electric vehicle story. I hope there's some folks on the call that might be interested. And it's a pleasure to kind of share the experience that I've had. What influenced my decision to buy an electric vehicle? Some tactical things, but also the bigger picture, my concern for the environment was important. It was actually a factor for me, is looking for something that was a little gentler on the planet. But going back to 2011, our workplace installed EV charging stations. So it was kind of a new thing back then. And one of my colleagues, I saw him charging his Chevy Volt EV. It was like a 2011. He was an early adopter, and I was pretty intrigued by that. So I started researching vehicles, and there wasn't much information out there, and there weren't many choices. Nissan Leaf, the Chevy Volt, and Tesla were really the only cars that were really around. It was kind of the Wild West, but it had some fun stuff. The test drive was interesting. So I will say this. So I did end up buying a Tesla Model S. It was done all online. And I would say the test drive was pretty interesting. The closest test drive was White Plain, New York. There weren't any dealers here. There was a Tesla store in the Natick Mall, but they didn't have any cars to drive, so it was a little cumbersome. But so I put a deposit down, $5,000 deposit on a car that I didn't happen to drive yet. Waited 9 months, but and it was delivered and set up at my home. My experience, my personal experience, electric vehicles are absolutely a thrill to drive. Almost any electric vehicle, I mean, I would just encourage people to test drive one. They are peppy. They are really quiet. I think the technology, I mean, all new vehicles today have great technology. Back then I was mesmerized by a very large screen that sort of, the operating system basically. Electric vehicles have something called one pedal driving because there's regenerative braking. When you let off the accelerator, the car slows down. You can really drive the car by just with one pedal. Yes, you do have to hit the brakes now and then to come to a full stop. The early days were unique and kind of fun. I'd get followed into parking lots, and people would be like, what kind of car is this? The conversations were really kind of fun. And I got pulled over by the police, and they just wanted to know what kind of car it was and just have a conversation. So that was kind of fun. In the old days, Tesla owners had like a little, Tesla Wave. I mean, there was just 3,000 owners at that point, so a very small group. But I would say so my car just hit 100,000 miles. Very little maintenance. Over-the-air software updates improve the vehicle over time. So the vehicle actually gets better, which is a bizarre concept for me. Sure, it's getting older. Yes, things are going to wear out, but the way the vehicle operates changes and gets better, which is kind of cool. Some of us, Tesla owners from a long time ago got into a program where we get free Tesla supercharging. The good news about the Tesla superchargers, and you probably have seen these in malls and other locations, they are opening that up to several other car manufacturers. So good for people that are considering other vehicles. And often there is privileged parking in parking garages when you go to places where the parking and charging stations are in predominantly, nice locations near the elevators and so forth. So it's kind of fun. Very quickly, overall operational costs compared to a gas car, and I'm using my Acura TL as a comparison. I would say the cost is like nearly 2/3 less to operate, my experience. That can differ by vehicle, but when you look at an 85 mile per gallon equivalent, it's pretty remarkable. Where do you see 85 miles per gallon on anything? So that kind of makes the difference. I replace washer fluid, tires. I do wheel alignments. Of course, there's been a couple of, there was a couple of recalls. Things were fixed over the air, a couple of nuts and bolts here and there kind of thing. And this is interesting, think about how many times you replace brake pads or brake calipers or brake parts. Over 100,000 miles now, I've not had to replace brakes. So the savings kind of continues. The Acura, I loved my Acura, wonderful car. It went 220,000 miles. But over that time, spent about $10,000 on some significant repairs and maintenance. So big difference. So some thoughts, doing research is key. I mean, today you have so much information and there are so many choices of vehicles and they look beautiful. They drive nice. There are two websites, the More EV program, moreev.org, which is a Massachusetts-based site, and the Green Energy Consumer Alliance, which I've actually spent a lot more time on because I think Fred mentioned it to me. And honestly, that's a great site for anything green energy. Really pretty cool. So, if you're looking, if people are interested, always look for the rebates that are available on electric vehicles. And that range is between 3,500, 6,000 and up, actually. Federal tax credit stands at 7,500. That may change from time to time. Yeah, dealers are great. Don't rely on them exclusively. They're very helpful, but do your own research. And for me personally, a vehicle that has at least 300 miles, to me, that's a good drive almost anywhere. In the old days, you had to really think about how you get to a destination. But with the technology and all the updates, with all these electric vehicles, you can program a destination and it pretty much tells you where you need to charge, which is pretty fun. Talk to friends that own EVs, get the inside scoop. That's always a helpful thing. And that's kind of the quick overview for me.
Terrific, terrific. Thank you so much, Jeff. Okay, and next up is Ken talking about air source heat pump.
This is our house. It's a 2,300 square foot Garrison Colonial. And it has a 300 square foot family room off the back that the prior owner added. We've got gas-fired hot water heat. We have a central air in the attic that serves the main house. We had a big problem in that the family room, where we spend most of our recreational time, about 90% of it, didn't have AC. And so we were over air conditioning the house. We'd have to turn the rest of the house down to freezing to sit in that room in the hot summer. And we wanted to do something about that. Instead of just buying an air conditioner, we got a partial air sourced mini split heat pump in 2002. And then when we did that, we also converted the downstairs so that the downstairs is actually on 2 heating zones. Get into without going into too many details, I'll get into the integrated stuff in a bit. Okay, so this is our mini split. Okay, it's air sourced. Yes, we have a box on the wall, but our sofa for watching TV is underneath those windows, and we're always facing the other way, so it's not a big deal. And then they actually did a nice install with the outdoor unit, because they put it under the deck where you don't even see it, you rarely hear it, and it actually, in the hot weather, it's out of the sun. Maybe that helps with efficiency. The system cost us $9,200. We did get a $2,800 rebate from Mass Save. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. It's a good idea to have these things cleaned about once a year. That's $200 or so in maintenance. They don't have the big pre-filters that a whole house system would have. They have a little screen. Integrated partial system. Okay, what that means is it heats part of the house, not the whole house, and it uses the regular old gas-fired baseboards as a backup. Okay, but you can still get a Mass Save credit for that. The equipment, including the indoor air units and the thermostat, have to be on an approved list. You have to have an integrated control. So what that means is we have a new thermostat in our family room. Okay, in the summer it cools, in the winter it heats. Okay, it will turn on only the heat pump in the back half of the house, as long as the outdoor temperature is above 40 degrees, because above 40 degrees, an air source heat pump is really, 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 really efficient. Okay, when it gets below that, it will use the gas heat as a backup. Okay, I guess it's sort of a no-brainer for Medfield, but the power has to be one of the power companies that is listed on Eversource, and you have to use an approved contractor. Some of this stuff changes from time to time. So if you are going to do a heat pump, check the current Mass Save rules. For a partial system, we did not have to get a home energy assessment. We did eventually get one anyway. It's free. Do it. Okay. As far as I know, you need a full house assessment for a full house system. that might change a little bit. Check the rules before you do that. You fill out a bunch of forms on Mass Save. After you're done, you send Mass Save a copy of the invoice, and then 3 to 5 weeks later, you get a check in the mail. And you can check the status on the website. And it was a little disconcerting because I sent the stuff in, it said pending. A week later, it said went to not approved. I'm like, oh gosh, I didn't do it right. I called them up, I panicked, and they said no. Pending to not approved means we're looking at it, but we have not yet approved it. So some 3 to 5 weeks after I sent in all the paperwork, we got a check for the rebate. So that did pay for some of it. I did mention the integration is important. That helps with the efficiency, and it helps with getting that Mass Save rebate. We already had 3 zones and our boiler, but 2 of them for downstairs were wired together on one thermostat. So we had our contractor, they were really good about this. They actually put in 2 new thermostats, one all the way in the front of the house and one all the way in the back of the house. I'm not going to read all this. I'm just going to say, based on where my wife and I are in the house at any given time, we have them all programmed with timers so that we only heat upstairs, we're only upstairs. We only heat or cool the family room, we're in the family room. And I think that contributes somewhat to our savings. It was really worth splitting that. I mean, what does this allow us to do? The benefits. The heat pump is replacing a portion of our gas heat with electric. The integrated control lets us split our house more so that we can, again, heat or cool only the rooms we need at the time. We no longer have to air condition our main house to make it comfortable. Our heating room, the heat pump is really comfortable. When on a 50-degree, 40-degree fall day, we go into the family room, it's 64 degrees. We click the button, it goes up a few degrees. You feel really comfortable, really fast. I mean, the comfort level is just great. Data. I'm going to call this anecdotal. I'm going to call this anecdotal because several things changed about the same time. We have the heat pump in the family room, and we added the additional thermostat. That was the project I'm talking about. Okay, but within a year of that, we also went to Mass Save, and they will pay for upgrading your insulation. They pay like 75% of the cost. So we got $1,300 worth of insulation, and it cost us like $320. We also replaced the outdoor unit or main AC. It may have been more efficient. And obviously, some winters are extreme, some summers are extreme, subject to weather. You don't know if you got better energy one year just because it wasn't as cold. But this is the summer of 22, 23, and 24 here. And these spikes in summer, we did something right, okay? Because these spikes in summer are noticeably less than the spikes in the prior years. And our winter has come down a little bit also. So I'm not so much concerned with which of these did it or whether it was a combination of all 3 or 4, but we're headed in the right direction. That's electric. And then the last thing I have here is we've only gone through 2 winters with the new system and those other upgrades. And you can see, again, the gas usage here. Yeah, that's all. And we're looking 20-25% decrease in energy for the last for almost 2.5 years based on the improvements we've used. And I'm using a stopwatch, and I said 8 minutes, and that's 77 minutes and 34 seconds. So I'm going to stop talking.
I just want to say each of the presentations were so efficient. I mean, you're not only energy efficient, you're also presentation efficient. Very impressive group here. Thank you very much, each and every one of you. How many people already have solar, including the presenters? So you can take yourself, show your video to see your hands. How many people are considering solar? Gosh, it sort of puts Deborah on the spot, doesn't it? Oh, and Pete, thanks, Pete. All right. And Ken says, I wish too many trees and they are protecting wetland. And Ken, okay, good. All right, so any questions related to that are fine, but let's just keep going for the moment. How many people have heat pump one way or the other? How many people might consider a heat pump?
Oh, pressure's on me. Oh, good, Deborah, thank you.
Yeah, Lee and Emily and Pete and Deborah. Okay, terrific, terrific. And by the way, as I said at the beginning, this is not an experts, this is not a sales thing. And I've been at these programs where they start off with all good intentions, and when they get to this kind of a Q&A and people are, potentially exposing that they might be a customer, I've seen a couple of situations where they made the mistake and they did let in a salesperson who up until that point was pretty cool, but then pounced on the potential customers. So no pouncing here. All right, and last but not least, how many people drive an electric vehicle? Cool, and how many people might consider one?
Does a hybrid count?
Yeah, we have a hybrid, but
Oh,
that counts.
A hybrid electric, a plug-in hybrid electric is considered electric. A hybrid gas vehicle is considered a gas vehicle.
Oh, okay, then no.
A more efficient, but still a gas vehicle. Okay, cool. So let's get some questions going. Pete, you started out. You want to just say it out loud, please? If you don't mind taking yeah, okay.
Hey guys, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks for hosting this. A lot of great information. We are looking into a bunch of different options, geothermal, solar, and heat pumps. So I had a bunch of questions for the geothermal topic. Did they ever discuss the option of drilling vertical versus the horizontal loops? We're trying to see if we could do horizontal instead of the vertical loops.
I asked, certainly when we were going through the evaluation, which would be less expensive. We do have a fairly large backyard, and I thought horizontal might be an option, but they said absolutely more cost effective to do the vertical. So they said for that reason. In New England, I guess it's just they seem the dandelion folks seem to think it was much more cost effective.
Yeah,
So-
one contractor worked upstate New York exclusively where Dandelion began, I think, and said, oh, upstate we used to do it because people had just acres and acres and we could just rip a hole for 300 feet, but generally in Medfield, even with a big yard, you can't do that without really having a lot of
Right.
landscaping costs afterwards. So yeah.
Okay. Awesome. And then should I just run through my questions? Sorry, I don't want to hog the call, but I do have a bunch of questions.
Good point, Pete. So if other people have questions, just raise your hand and we will move around.
Okay. And then any other notable contractors you've heard of for geothermal?
Fred used a different contractor that we talked to ourselves. Fred, you can cover that, but that was about the extent that we considered.
There are two reputable ones that either one I'd recommend checking in with, and I will put them in the chat in a couple minutes. And one of them, does anybody know what I'm going to say? One of them lives in Medfield.
Right.
Yeah. Marty Oreo, awesome guy. So hold your next question, Pete, if you don't mind. And Kathleen had a question.
Yes, for Glenn and Kirsten, just a couple. Did you use the ducts for your AC? Is that what or did they have to put new ones? They did.
Same exact duct work. In fact, that was a prerequisite. They had to have duct work to the rooms that you were going to be heating or cooling. And the only thing we did is we did upgrade them. We had them sealed. They came in and professionally, they put this stuff in there that seals all the holes. And they did some insulation around them to make them a little tighter because they were 20 plus years old. But aside from that,
And you guys actually have an attic, not a truss attic. See, my biggest problem with all of this stuff is a truss attic for almost everything I have, as you, my good friends know, because I've had conversation I've had with you has been about this.
Yeah, we have a
Yeah.
system in the basement that does the basement and first floor, and then the system in the attic does the second.
Okay. And what about
Theoretically, you could
your
do
beautiful grass fireplace? What happens with that?
You want me to leave for you?
We are going off, I mean, we still have natural gas for our stovetop, which we're gonna change to induction at some point.
Mhm.
And we have, unfortunately, we had a hot water heater go out in 2018, and I wanted to get a heat pump hot water heater,
Yeah.
but it was a 3-week lead time, and going in the winter without hot water for 3 weeks was not an option, so we
Right.
put a natural gas one. So that one will be in until it dies, and then we'll put a heat pump in it. At that point, we can seal up and go completely off natural gas and that for the house, which is what we would like to do. Because right now we pay more for the monthly bill than we do for the actual gas. That's
Right.
so sad.
So you'll just go back to wood burning.
We'll have nothing. We'll do electric everything.
We actually, our fireplace is wood burning now.
Oh, yeah. Our fire.
We don't
Oh,
have,
that one is, okay,
This one's.
okay.
So we'll keep bouncing around here if that's okay. Hilly?
I was just going to say the same thing that Len just said, that, we have gas fireplaces, and right now we pay multiple in the distribution part than in the actual gas. And, at some point that we'll just have to consider what to do with the fireplaces.
Right.
based on
I have
what they've been saying about gas stoves too, I wonder how healthy it is to have a gas fireplace in your home now. I don't know.
Well, they're completely sealed,
Are they?
they're not, yeah, they don't really come in contact with the indoor air.
Yeah. All right. That was it.
Okay, great. Let's see, I'm looking for some next question. Pete, you want to keep going then with whatever your next questions were?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So geothermal and heat pumps. So we're looking at both of those. One of the contractors was saying it's probably a good idea to keep the furnace as a backup in case it gets real cold. 10 degrees, 0, -10. When you were looking at heat pumps and geothermal and all that kind of stuff, did you hear the same warning with those kind of systems?
No, because you're pulling from the ground, you're always pulling water. I mean, even if it cools coming out of the well, it's still going to be in the 40s or 50s. So when we're talking about heat pumps, they say they're very efficient, 40 degrees and above. So we're always 40 degrees and above. So there's no need to have a backup of anything. There is a backup resistant heat system on the outside chance it gets so cold that the groundwater gets below freezing. And it is the water that gets pumped through the well has ethylene glycol so it won't freeze. If it does, for whatever reason, drop below 32, it won't freeze and damage anything. It has antifreeze in it. But the only auxiliary heat that we have is what's called resistant heat, and it's never come on in a year yet. We have not had our resistant heat system come on. Don't anticipate it ever to come on.
So
Ground source, right, Fred? Ground source should be much more consistent regardless of any extreme temperature. That's the beauty of it, right? Air source has to take that very hot or very cold air and turn it into the desired temperature. Ground is always consistent at 3 or 4 feet below or 2 or 3 feet below ground. It's
and down, right? Your wells are 400?
400 feet, yeah.
So
average 400. One's
300 to
over
400,
400,
yeah.
one's under, yeah.
I'll just throw in that I also have ground source heat pump for 3 years now. And so, yeah, but I think, did you say this, Glenn, that they had to include the resistance backup element? And I said, do I need that? And they said, you probably won't, but we have to include it. I said, do I have to use it? They said, we're walking out of here in 10 minutes. And they were at the end. And I said, well, is there a way that I could? Yes. So I can switch a breaker, and we've never had to use it either.
Yeah, we have the exact same thing. They put the auxiliary on a separate breaker that I've never turned it off, but it's never, all of this, they give you apps on your phone, and I can monitor the temperature of the water coming into the house, leaving the house, the efficiency. You can monitor everything if you're into that tech stuff. And our auxiliary is one of the things you can monitor. It's never turned on, so.
And you got bells and whistles. I did not. Okay, Jeanette.
There's a question for Brian and Heidi. when you said you put in a second solar system after a while from the first, and somewhere I had read or heard that it was so difficult to do that. And this might have been a while ago, but could you talk more about how that went, and was it the same company that you used in the first place?
Yeah. It is the same company. And the complicating factors for it is that it's considered a separate system in a separate account. It's got a separate power purchasing agreement because we leased it, and the terms are slightly different. So since we have 2 years between the two, they're both 25-year leases. Obviously, we're going to have one lease that expires 2 years prior to the second one. The integration was seamless. So the technology on the metering and everything else with the net metering with Eversource was very straightforward. The integration with the rest of the electrical panel and systems inside the house was extremely straightforward. I think they basically just put in a separate meter and interconnect that put both of the solar systems on the same inbound lines going into the house. So whether one's generating X% or the other is generating Y, it's transparent to us. It just works as the same thing. They just have different meters on them, so they can charge us different rates, I think. But beyond that, it was pretty straightforward. Since we use the same company, all of our maintenance, if we need them, is done with the same points of contact. If we decide to purchase them, we go through the same people, and that just makes it very streamlined. So
they were much better the second time around with communication consistently, of where we were in the process, when was the possibility of the next inspector coming, and communicating all that. So they got better on that end than the first time.
Vendors on a learning curve. That's
yeah,
good.
Thank you.
That's the way it should be, I guess. Great. So Jeanette, was that sufficient answer for you?
Yeah, I wonder if all solar companies would be responsive like that. I'm like the debates I went through Solar City some years ago, and whenever that was, and when they were around in Medfield, and now it's Tesla, and I have a hard time imagining that Tesla was going to listen to me, but I don't know. This was helpful. Thank you.
We did try. When I was worried that we wouldn't be generating enough power to cover the whole geothermal system, I did reach out to Tesla, and they pretty much said no. So that's what I know.
I'm sorry, Glenn, they said no to what?
To adding additional panels. So
hopefully they said no, thank you, but okay.
Dean, I had Trinity, and I couldn't speak highly enough of that company. It was very difficult to get solar panels on our house, just because of. It's a long story. I can explain to you another time at a Sustainable Medfield meeting, but it was very difficult with the town and the inspector to get solar panels on our house, and they were fantastic and communicated with us clearly, constantly, kept coming back, and the inspector put them through the ringer. So if you want to connect with them, actually 2 of them will be coming that night. They were very kind, so I found them very helpful. So I don't know if you want that name. I thought they were great.
Do we still have the same inspector?
No, I think he's gone. And I won't say that I had anything to do with it at all.
Okay. Well,
I had a similar experience. I had great Sky Solar, and I can only recommend them as well. And I think most of the delay that happened was either through the inspection or Eversource. We had our system was supposed to come on in March, and there was a series of storms, and all their crews got busy, and it kept getting delayed for several weeks with every storm because the crews were fixing power lines somewhere, and so we had a significant delay just because of Eversource.
Yeah.
Yeah, that between Eversource and the town inspection, those were the biggest delays for us too.
Well, let's watch that over the next years, that such delays, seriously, that such delays are shortened. Let's hope for that. And let's also hope, I appreciate you bringing up about uh, power outages that crews might be sent to. So before we started, Kirsten had a little story. I don't know if you want to remind folks, but this is very, very much climate related. Do you mind, Kirsten, just
Sure. I was just mentioning to Fred that I have a dear friend who lives right in Sarasota, Florida, and basically can't even leave now. It's too late. She said sort of the window has closed, airports are closed. And it's really, of course, this Category 5 storm over the ocean that's, 3 or 4 degrees hotter than any kind of normal temperature is really the reason we're having these insane storms. And so even if we couldn't save money or even break even, I think I would, if I was able to afford it, I would do my whatever I could to eliminate the fossil fuel use in our home, because I think it's that critical.
it's powerful.
Can I add something about the sizing? So
Right.
we
And
own.
Hilly,
So
can I just ask before you do? We're going to end in a couple minutes. Oh no, I'm sorry. We can keep going. We can keep going. That's right. But I do want to see who's going to talk about MCE. Is that you, Hilly?
I think I'm designated to do that, and Megan said she would back me up, and Emily too. So I'm from the Energy Committee, and I was also involved in writing the Climate Action Plan. And one of the goals we had was to allow Medfield residents to plan their own journey to decarbonizing their lives. And one of the tools that we are very proud to see in place now is the Medfield Community Electricity Program. It came online this spring. The town applied for the program about 3 years ago, and it was rigorously checked and approved in the end by the state. So it's tightly regulated. It's a program where the town went out to bid for bulk electricity buying for all residents by a third-party supplier. And we now have a program that offers 3 levels of supply. So this is only the supply. If you look at your electricity bill, I'm sure you're aware there's a supply and a distribution part. So this only affects your supply. And we can now offer a program that is safe and very economically competitive, and where you can opt in, out, up, or down, whatever you wish, free of charge. And as a tool for all of Medfield, I think it's a very powerful tool. So each of us, every resident, can now decide if they want to start their journey to decarbonize their lives in a safe program, because there is a basic level that it has a renewable portion of the electricity, the same as Eversource Basic, which is legally mandated. And then there is a level that adds 10%, which is called Medfield Standard. Or you can also opt up to 100% renewable. And I think there are some households that were left out of this, because if you started with a third-party supplier, you were never notified of this program. So if somebody wants to check out if their program with a different third-party supplier is competitive, they can look into a website that we have. Megan, can you maybe put the website in the chat.
Oh, sure. Yep.
And that gives you all the details that you would need to know. Our advice is to make sure you read the fine print of your third-party supplier, because there could be some fees or penalties if you want to leave the program. And if you decide to leave, you would just tell your supplier, you don't call Eversource. They don't have anything to do with it. You'd have to opt out of your third-party supplier. Then you become part of Eversource. And then the next month, at the next reading, you can opt into the Medfield Community Electricity.
Great.
There's about 380 households in Medfield that didn't get notified. And we also have about 380 or 400 households that opted out for whatever reason.
So can we do a show of hands here? How many people are already Medfield 100? Okay. And that means 100% of your electricity consumption is carbon zero. That's fantastic. And how many people might be interested or might consider a Medfield 100?
Well, I'll switch. I'm currently 100% renewable with a third party. So I have been for a few years. So I'm going to convert it in, at the end of my contract.
So may I ask why why you would like to switch?
Why I would like to switch? It will actually be cheaper when I first looked at the numbers. And I want to support the Medfield Community Electricity. So,
are there questions that people might have about Medfield Community Electricity, one way or the other?
Hilly, I have a question for Hilly. Is it true that if Helen and 380 other people do opt in, the next time Medfield goes to renegotiate the contract, we'll get even better rates theoretically for the whole town? Or is it
tough to say? I think Megan can speak to that better. Yeah, I mean, it's about contract, and my gut feeling is the more households are part of it, the better standing you are. But it's not negotiated. It's really you go out to bid and see what the market gives you.
Okay.
Megan, do you have anything else to say about that?
Nope. Hilly, you did a great job.
Helen.
I was just going to make a comment with heat pumps, and like we were talking about the solar and adding on to an existing system. So I know with heat pumps and adding on, we've been told we have some heat pumps which are probably maybe 5 years old now, but we were told that it can be difficult to add on to this is air source heat pump, because the technology changes so quickly. So they can't easily add on to a system. So chances are, if you wanted to add more, you might have to get another system, is what we were told.
Yeah, one issue with that is also refrigerants are phased out, and the one going on now is R410A. And with each year, they have to do less installs with that refrigerant. And I believe nobody will put in a new system with R410A. They will, if you have a component that needs to be replaced, like an air handler, they will replace that. But I guess the majority of the refrigerant sort of lives in the outdoor unit, the compressor. So you're not going to be able to get an R410A, compressor, and may be able to get an indoor unit. There's something new, but they have to be compatible with the refrigerants. And I don't know the details. The last one they phased out 20-some years ago was R22, and there was something they could do with changing the size of an expansion orifice to convert to a different refrigerant. But
all right. So, Helen, are you saying you have a central air source heat source?
No, it's an air source heat pump.
Right.
What, like room by room?
Yes. Yeah.
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
And Jeff, you have your hand up.
I wanted to ask Brian and Heidi a question about the roof age. Is there a certain age? I remember hearing like a roof couldn't be more than 7 years old to put a solar array on. Are there standards now, or what are people saying about how old can a roof be?
Ours was probably 15 years old when we first had them put on. The majority of it's asphalt shingle, just to clarify that. The majority of the shingles were fine. We've never, we didn't have any leakage or a ton of rot, but once we were taking down more and more trees and getting a lot of direct sunlight exposure, we were starting to get some curling. And that's when we decided to just go ahead and do the replacement. I would say I would on a 25-year roof, I would probably not put something on that's 10 to 15 years old again. It was, that was probably pushing it, but I don't know that there's any hard and fast rule.
Thanks.
Good. Pete, you had a batch of questions before. I'm not sure if you got through them.
I did, yes. And yeah, let me see. Thank you, Brian, for answering the other question. But just want to see if anybody else had this or running into this issue or had run into this before. But on the solar side and also the heat pump side, both have to do with electrical. We're advised we might have to pull a 400 amp line, and we might need to update the transformer on the street, which we've been warned by Eversource on that until they really start to look into the application. Has anybody had to upgrade from a 200 to a 400 or upgrade the transformer on the street when they were doing new electrical, new heat pumps, solar system, anything like that?
I'll jump in with my experience. I made a significant mistake, and now I can't even remember the sequence, but we went to just a basic residential car electric vehicle charger, and that required an upgrade. And we went to solar. Now I'm thinking there were 3. Huh. Anyway, that required an upgrade, and we went to heat pump. That required an upgrade. Somehow we got away with 2 upgrades, but 3 times it was needed. So we were smart enough to combine 2 of them, I guess. But anyway, my point is, think ahead. If you possibly can. If you don't already have electric vehicles, think that you will. If you don't already have heat pumps, think that you will. And whether you can have solar or not. Anyway, literally, it all adds up. And it's crazy to have to do it multiple times. Sorry, I was crazy. Okay. So here's a partial answer.
Transformer, and what'd you have to upgrade?
Say again, I don't remember what the amperage was each time. It's a good question. I'm sorry, I don't know that.
Okay.
So our experience, we had a 200 amp service into the house. Our house was built in 98, so it's fairly new, and we had 200 amp, and that was sufficient to do the charger for the car and the heat pump, the 2 big draws, and we have solar, as I said. So we have not had to upgrade beyond the 200 amp. So we did have to put in extra sub panels a couple of times, but other than that, we did not have to upgrade the service. And nothing from the street either.
Yeah,
so we
it
never
may depend a little bit on the size of your house. If you have a huge house that needs a lot of power, you might need to go to 400. But the standard, like whatever most people have between 2,000 and 3,000 square feet, I think is unlikely.
Okay.
And Brian, you use more power than we do. Yeah, with the hot tub and the pool and everything. Are you more than a 200 amp?
We're not. We have 2 sub panels that have to hang off the side of it, and we did some consolidation to make sure that we had the right circuits available. We asked about upgrading, and unless we decide to put in like a separate larger than 10 by 10 shed that's got its own sub panel or something, they thought we were still fine.
Funny you mention that. I actually bought online for $500 a kit, and I put solar panels on my shed and with a battery and everything, and we run that we charge our electric string trimmer and electric equipment out in the shed using the sun as well. So that was very inexpensive. It was cheaper than having a trench dug to
Yeah.
run power out to the
I
shed.
believe that. That's
I
great.
mean, you had to be handy, but it
Yeah.
was cheap.
Oh, wow.
Pete, can I ask you about the question that you have about solar and the transformer? Have you already had discussions with Eversource on that?
Yeah, so I called them called them one time. They're looking they need the solar company to put together a formal system, and I've bid it out a few times. It's coming in between like 18 to 20 some odd kilowatt hour system. And the solar company said, you know, it's only really a 2% chance that you'll have to update the transformer, but we won't find out until the application is submitted to Eversource to then see how old or how small that transformer is on the street,
Mm.
which could take both of those, a transformer and a 400 amp line. They're like, those are you know, could be a 4-month process each.
Right, and that would be a significant cost too, you know. Um,
Right.
I would love to stay in touch and hear how that is going, or just really be updated on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, this chat has been extremely helpful. Taking a
So for real, Eversource, if they're upgrading their street transformer, would charge the customer for that, or is that just a time issue, not a money
Yeah,
issue?
no, it's a sort of, you have, Megan, you can help me with this probably. So that area that is covered by that transformer has a certain capacity. And if one customer installs something that goes over the capacity of the transformer, that customer legally is responsible for the transformer.
Oh,
At least that's what it used to be. I don't know if they changed it, because obviously that's ridiculous. Sorry.
It's still the
Um,
unfortunately.
mhm.
Sorry, Pete. I think that needs to be addressed in some way. I don't really know if that is still true. That was a couple of years ago that I heard this.
I think we heard it in the context of non-residential.
Right. Well, large, yeah, large, non-residential. So I don't know if they would really go and charge a resident for the smaller areas that they have.
Eventually, this seems to get back to community organizing. You know, Pete, are you the only one off of that transformer that's going to be upgrading in the next 5 years?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, I've looked at the houses nearby too, and where the roof lines are facing, and maybe that's, you know, someone just needs to bite the bullet and you know, start to lead this in the neighborhood, and maybe a couple other houses will tag along. But the transformer is like Eversource was quoting me 4 to 7,000, just roughly, not to hold them to it. But he's like, if you run into this issue, you could look around that price.
Yeah, but it still seems like a very,
Mhm.
Yeah, we're upgrading the grid.
yeah, very interesting arrangement.
Yeah. It's one of those things that they're, you think about what the legislature does or the DPU is thinking of and how your rates are structured and what fees come in and who's responsible for these kinds of upgrades, but it definitely falls in that. But the last time we were looking at something was a potential new school at Wheelock, and it was definitely, if you triggered the need for the transformer, you were gonna have to pay for it.
In that case, the U was the town
Oh.
via the school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
large, like you said,
Yeah.
large.
So yeah, I'm surprised about the home transformer, but I don't know. I hope it changes.
Yeah, something too, just that I just found out this week is if we are installing a 20 kilowatt system, there's some new law that went into effect. It's basically like I guess a commercial net metering system because of the size
Yeah.
of them. And the solar company hasn't really, at least the company I was talking with, hasn't really caught up to it yet. Just
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there's like a 10K limit to residential, and or it's yeah.
Right. It sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, this like my system is over 10K, but what actually comes out of it is below just because of the conversion from DC to AC and all that sort of stuff. But the law distinguishes between the smaller 10K and below and the larger systems, and then you all of a sudden fall into a whole different regulatory scheme.
I had heard recently that, like you were saying, there's a cap, 10, is it megawatts or I always forget the
KW.
terminology, KW, that the cap is being raised and they're waiting for someone to sign off, but they're expecting very soon that this cap to kind of be removed for residential or raised to 25, so something way higher.
That's good news.
Mm.
So Pete, maybe you just want to wait a little bit.
Or you can do what we did and do it in 2 steps.
Right.
That's interesting. And I forget, Pete, are you considering purchasing or lease or PPA?
Purchasing.
Right. So I can imagine you working with a contractor and literally saying, can we do this in stages? And if you do that at the outset, I can imagine that could be very smooth. Of course, if you come back, and after they're totally finished and say, let's go again, that could be less efficient. I was just going to say that as a generalization that I think what we were talking about a minute ago, at least, was what sometimes is called grid upgrade or grid modernization, which makes the grid smarter. But think about it here. We're just a small group of residents in one town, and talking about upgrading of service is going to be happening all over the place. So lots and lots and lots of transformers and the whole system needs to be upgraded. It keeps coming back to that. Okay, so how are we doing with questions? Hilly, you
I
have
have
your
one
hand.
more question to Brian. When you said you installed 2 systems, do they both go through the same net metering meters, or how is that set up?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, I just wanted to bring this up because Pete, there is rules about having 2 net meters in one property, which is, I think, not allowed. Megan, help me out here. And so even if you do it in stages, you would still have to go through the same meters.
That's okay. Yeah, it's interesting to know. Okay. Thank you.
And before we wrap
That
up,
was for the SMART program. You could
Right.
only have one SMART program relationship per lot.
there's a couple of people that haven't spoken up. If now's a good time, if you want to say anything, give any input, any feedback, any questions. But thanks for everyone for being here. Are we done with the questions? Don't want to.
I just had a quick question on battery storage. I haven't really touched on it in this call, but we're definitely looking into different battery storage, whether it's Tesla or at Enphase or any of those different systems. Does anybody have a battery storage system?
No, yeah. I had somebody else ask me that question who was considering, and they were asking if they knew of anybody who had battery storage. And I asked around to everybody looking for somebody, and I wasn't able to find anybody.
Okay.
And Helen, I believe that's, again, this goes back to the net metering question. As long as you have, net metering and you can basically use the grid as your battery, it doesn't make any sense to pay for putting a battery in. I mean, I guess you do have the advantage that if the grid goes down, you can run off your battery and you don't have to have another backup. But other than that, if you have net metering and you can sell electricity back at the retail rate, then there's no reason to, basically use a battery system for storage, because you can use the grid essentially as your storage and pull it off the grid whenever you want. So that takes a lot of the advantage of a battery away, other than just a backup.
So that brings us back to the thread that we mentioned before of the calamity that seems to be about to land on Florida. And I do remember a couple of years ago, whatever major hurricane lashed that area. I remember a particular story that who was up and running in general first and well were those who had solar installed, way before the general grid was operating. Here we don't tend to have such calamitous events facing us, but it gets into islanding and everything like, there's a number of issues to have your system. If you want to have a system running when the grid around you is not, there's issues involved with that. There's steps you have to take. All right, Pete, how are we doing? You're asking great questions. Are we getting towards the end of them?
Yeah, and I just something to add on this point is something they're doing, I guess, in California and Arizona with the batteries is they're actually doing load balancing and helping the grid. So I'm just trying to see like to future-proof the house, especially if it doesn't sound like Massachusetts is doing like per hour or per minute per day pricing. But something they do down in Arizona is they do have load balancing and different pricing at different times of day. So then these kind of systems, potentially with a battery, which we're looking at, could hopefully future-proof it where, we could use the battery when the grid hours are too high, and then we can sell back services, vice versa. So something that we're looking at and trying to see what they're doing over in Arizona. Definitely California, they're definitely leading the front in some of this area stuff, some of the stuff too. But just wanted to see if anybody had good battery recommendations, but I'll continue hunting. And lastly, if anybody, if there's like a central repository of like vendors or contractors or anything that I can look at with literature wise, love to tap into that knowledge. This is the first time that I'm hopping on a call here, so really just dipping the toe at this point, but trying to make a decision within the next couple months.
I just wanted to make a general comment, and Pete, I'm glad you're there. So one program you could look into, and I think it now exists in Massachusetts, is Connected Solutions, where Eversource is trying to balance out those, handful of peak times during the year when it's really expensive to produce electricity, and they are looking to reduce usage, and you get paid for reducing your energy use during those predicted, pre-announced times. And I think they may even, you'd have to look into it, they may even pay you to get electricity out of your battery during those times.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'll check them out. Thank you. Thank you again for letting me have the floor as long as I did, Fred.
You had great questions. I think the questions were, shared by many people. So thanks for not being shy about them. So, and thank you to everyone, to Brian, to Heidi, Kirsten, to Glenn, to Jeff, and Ken for taking the time to put together such impressive and heartfelt presentations. Really appreciate it. I just want to say this format, this Decarbonizers format, is something that's been going on for some years. Helen and I have worked on 3 now. This is the 3rd one in Medfield. Is that right?
Yep.
We're a pretty special town. I just want to let you all know. But what we have found is that each time we do it, the next time we do it, there are people who say, and I heard about, and what they're talking about when they heard about it was a session like this. They heard from their neighbors. So it all builds. We all need the experts. We all need the contractors to work with, but it's word of mouth that makes a huge difference. This is more than word of mouth, but keep talking, keep talking. People need to hear the same thing 7 times, the same thing 7 times. Wait, I don't need to say it. Okay. But once people have said things numerous times, it tends to sink in. So thanks for doing it tonight. Thanks for doing it in the future. And
we have recorded it also, so we will send out the recording to all you guys, and anybody who registered. So this, and it'll be posted on the MEA website as well under the previous programs. So you can, you know, if you have neighbors or friends or somebody who couldn't get on the call, you can always send them the recording.
One more round of applause for Helen.
Yep.
And Fred, thank you for moderating. You do a great job.
Thank
was-
you very much, Fred, for
was-
moderating.
Helen did the hard work.